Are black people notoriously religious? Do majority of blacks have a true sense of what they are worshipping and why they are doing so? Why are there so many Christian denominations? What are the most positive things that religion has done for the black community? What time is it? It's question time. Welcome to the show. Following the recent tragedy in Nigeria, many questions have been raised by South Africans who wanted to know what the worshippers had gone there to do, which they cannot get here in South Africa. Thought leaders and scholars have engaged in psychoanalytical intellectual debates to understand the state of mind of those worshippers who traveled to Nigeria. Are black people notoriously religious, we ask? Consul Tliane is a social commentator and writer. He is also a sociology PhD student at the University of Cape Town. He wrote an article on Sunday asking some questions about black people and religion. Consul, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Let's just talk quickly about your article. Why are we notoriously religious?
Well, in my article, I'm attempting to provide what one can loosely term a sociological understanding of why people are religious. I think the question is not whether people are religious or not. I think when John Beatty coined that term to say that African people are notoriously religious is in 1969, and Bani Pichana followed in 1971, adapting it to the South African situation. It was kind of a given fact. Rather, the question is, what is religion doing to people? And it cuts across. It's not only black people. It's just so that I'm adapting my analysis to the South African situation, where it is the majority of black people. The majority of people are black, and in it, I'm trying to say that in and of itself, religion is not a bad thing. In fact, some people would argue that religion is a good thing. One of the local theologians, Itumelo Mosala, once commented in a private conversation that if there was no religion, he would in fact invent one. Because religion can provide some kind of solace to people. Those who are religious will tell you that conferring to a higher being is able to assist them to cope with life and things like that. However, the problem seems to me to be when religion becomes an escape, and not just an escape, but as the great scholar Marx once said, it becomes an opium, that instead of facing our own problems and challenging them and asking critical questions about socioeconomic issues, about political issues, you would have some amongst us escaping into religion. But more so that we have seen the emergence of religious leaders who are, one can be brave to say that, misleading people, misinterpreting the scriptures, but also giving false hope to people. For instance, you would have a situation where the poor, instead of being assisted to understand the political and economic roots of poverty that they live in, they are made to believe that their hardships can be ameliorated through just belief, but more so through taking the very last cent that they have and giving it with the hope that their hardships will be ameliorated.
You say in your article, and I quote, "Simply put, this is the belief that dedicated submission to God will lead to financial prosperity. No need to highlight the point that the related danger with this approach is that the poor may blame themselves for not being faithful and prayerful enough if they do not achieve the promised prosperity."
Yes. Just before that, you would know that what I said is that during the 1960s and 70s, they emerged what one can call another brand of Christianity. You would have the mainstream mainline churches. I don't need to mention them. Then in the 60s and 70s, we saw the emergence of what is generally called the Pentecostal branch of Christianity, which has been characterized by notions of being born again and things like that. And that in and of itself is for many people is a good thing because it brings spiritual revival and things like that. However, what we have seen, and that is my argument, we have seen two strands out of the broad mainstream of Pentecostalism, which is prosperity religion on the one hand and what I call cultic practices. Now, let us start with prosperity. It is a misleading notion that you must give and give, you must believe and believe, and therefore, if you are poor, you will become financially prosperous. And if you are rich or a middle class like you and me, you'll become even more prosperous. Now, we have seen two elements with that. You see poor people now starting to affiliate to some congregations, and also middle class and rich people starting to affiliate to those congregations. Now, in there are two reasons for affiliating to that. There is the socio-economic for the poor, who are made to believe that if they pray enough, if they've got enough faith, they will get out of their hardships. And no need to mention, we have seen ridiculous things that are, if you were to listen to theologians, are heretical, where people we are reading in the newspapers are made to eat grass. The latest is people are made to drink petrol and things like that. And those are devoid of any reason. The other element is that you then have middle class people or even rich.
Before we go to the middle class, are you blaming the poor for drinking petrol and eating grass?
No. I come from a school of thought that finds very little fault with poor people, with working class people. But I'm saying that because of their vulnerability, the poor become easy prey for people who would want to mislead them. Because of the socioeconomic conditions and environmental conditions under which we live, you find that poor people are much more vulnerable to believe anything that comes by and promises them to get them out of the poverty. And it is that vulnerability that some of the religious people are taking advantage of. And it is that taking advantage of poor people that we need to critique and we need to expose.
Let's talk about the middle class.
Well, we have also seen that phenomenon that middle class people like you and me would flock to certain congregations. And here I'm not talking about spiritual issues, but I want to emphasize on the prosperity emphasis or the prosperity part, which I think in theological terms, theologians will say is heretical. Because of the crass materialism that we live under, because of the aspirational environment under which we live, where everyone is now aspiring to live a luxurious life, those who can afford, like you and me, would then be drawn to certain practices where they also want to accumulate more. So you have an accumulationist and incrementally accumulationist mentality which has set in. Therefore, and that is why I'm saying the traditional Marxist understanding of religion being an opium of the masses is not adequate, because it does not explain why middle class and rich people are now joining in. It is now a new phenomenon of accumulating more.
We're going to take a break. When we return, I want us to talk about something which you mentioned in your article, that people seem to be using more their hearts as opposed to their brains. This is question time.
anyone have a gut feeling about other people's gut feeling?
Ngaba has continued the tradition of passing stories onto the next generation using a platform that offers stories to a far more greater audience.
Zombie no go unless you tell them to go.
This is what the audiences all over the world knew Fela Kuti for.
Join Musam Khalipi on Afro Showbiz every Saturday at 19:30 CAT.
SABC, sharing 20 years of inspiration.
Welcome back. You're still watching Question Time. My guest today is Consol Tliane. He's a social commentator, an author, writer, activist, and a PhD candidate at the University of Cape Town. Now, Consol, you write in this article, and I quote, "Instead of educating the poor that their condition is human-made, which is the result of the capitalist system of exploitation and greed, some religious leaders still play on the emotions of the poor, promising them that their faith only will take them out of poverty."
Yeah, what I mean is that we must not have a situation where people are made to believe that in and of itself, religion and faith is the be-all and end-all of our lives.
What else?
Instead,
Yeah.
and I think like Mbiti is saying, and like some scholars would say, religion needs to be integrated into our daily lives. And I think in this country we have got a rich history where some theologians, some religious leaders have demonstrated how their religious belief and their religious leadership can be integrated into our everyday life. No need to mention people like Archbishop Desmond Tutu, Jongonkulu Ndungane, Dennis Haley, Buti Tlhagale, and many other people who were saying we need to, through our faith, confront the daily lives that our people live under. We need, through our faith, confront the daily hardships and give hope to the poor without necessarily say that their amelioration will only come from belief. So there was an integration of belief and doing. And I think a school of thought that needs to come up and confront what we are seeing is a school of thought that says there needs to be a marriage and not a divorce between reason and revelation. There needs to be a marriage between the sacred and the secular. There needs to be a marriage between the heart and the head. And in that way, there is a balance and much more richer embracing of religious belief.
Are you saying that people are not thinking?
Well, I'm not saying that people are not thinking. However, what I want to argue is that there seems to be a tendency to encourage people to divorce reason from revelation.
How so? Give me an example.
And I'm saying, I think you need to look at what most of our people. Let us take a practical example. You and I know that there are certain diseases which medical science has not yet resolved. One of them is HIV and AIDS.
Yes.
Now, if a religious believer wants people to be, a religious leader wants people to believe that he or she can cure AIDS, we are saying that is a blatant lie.
But there are people, I was shouted at and called all sorts of names because I challenged that type of a view when I had two guests in KZN who were saying that one was saying she was healed, the other one was saying, I have something to do with her healing.
I come from a school of thought, and I think this is shared by many people, including most religious people themselves, to say that we have not had the cure for certain diseases. And therefore, any person who wants any group of people to believe that they can cure a disease like AIDS is simply and blatantly misleading people. Dare I say that they are lying? That is not the truth. It is not scientifically possible, nor is it plausible that a person can say that they can cure something. Rather, what a religious leader should do is to give hope, not for people not to lose the hope of living. Is to encourage people to embrace medical science, to take care of themselves, and to have the belief that they can still live through the assistance of medical intervention.
Are you questioning faith?
I'm not questioning faith. What I'm saying is that faith needs to be married with reason.
No, but faith is said to be things unseen, or you have no proof that it exists, but you believe.
Yes, and in fact, philosophers and scientists of religion will tell you that through grappling with these philosophical and scientific questions, you are even in a position to strengthen your faith. Let me give an example. Some of the ancient philosophers have argued that the existence of God can be proven through scientific and philosophical inquiry, where the ultimate end or the ultimate answer is that God is the uncaused cause. That is, if you follow the cosmological argument of science, you are saying ultimately there must have been something that has caused that which exists. But what I'm saying, the point is not to question faith. The question is how faith and religion can be misused.
Okay. You also say the second factor which can be observed across all social classes is that is the resort to religion with the hope that the hardships caused by today's stresses can only be solved through deferment to God.
By that point, and in fact I qualify it further, if you read down to say that does not mean...
Yeah, you're saying it is true that change of lifestyle and reflection and taking time off from our hectic schedules is beneficial.
Very much beneficial.
We must not just go to church.
No. You integrate.
Okay.
And my whole point is the integration of daily life, of religion into our daily lives. Yeah. And in that way, what comes out is much more a richer part of our lives. Let me demonstrate the point. People will tell you that taking time off, identifying the causes of your own personal stresses is very much beneficial. Those who believe, religious people will further even tell you that taking time off, going on a retreat, on a reflection is very much beneficial, not only for the soul, but also psychologically and emotionally. The point I'm trying to demonstrate is that if you do not take care of your emotional life, if you do not take of your psychological well-being, if you do not take care of your physical well-being, and only hope that through faith you will be delivered and you will have some peace, that is what is misleading. Okay. It's the old argument that you and I would have grown up with, where our teachers say, you must study. You cannot just read before the exams and hope to pass.
Okay. So people must not just pray, they must go to gym and take time off.
Take time off.
Okay. We're taking a quick break. When we return, let's talk about Jeremiah Kamara and what he says. This is Question Time.
I realized life is short. I want to live my dream.
They can bend my face, but not my voice.
I'm definitely not a cross-dresser. South Africa, I'm just a gay man.
Join Puleng Molebatsi on Bupilong every Saturday at 17:30 CAT.
SABC, sharing 20 years of inspiration.
Welcome back. You're still watching Question Time. My guest today is Consol Tliane. He's a social commentator and a writer. Now, Consol, somebody who you probably would be familiar with, Jeremiah Kamara, has said something here, whether about religion. To say that religion is the transport system into the psychology of people. It appeals to our greatest fears and hopes, so it's relatively easy to manipulate people through their beliefs. You agree?
Partly.
Okay.
And partly not.
Mm-hmm.
I think religion can be a very beautiful thing. In fact, it is a very beautiful thing. And like I said, one of the theologians is saying, if there was no religion, he would invent one.
Yeah.
And before going to Kamara, let me just demonstrate a point. For instance, some of the most productive, some of the most peaceful people, as you know, are monks, whether they are Christian monks, whether they are Buddhist monks, or from any other religion. They are the most brilliant people because religion allows them to have a deeper sense of reflection and to go into a deeper sense of human perfection. However, if not mixed with a sense of reason, that is where Kamara is right to say that you can manipulate people. Now, if you are a religious leader who only encourages people and say that you must only believe without having the capacity to reflect, then you have the ability and you have the space to manipulate them. Because what happens is that they become an uncritical mass which blindly follows what the leader is saying.
Having the hope that one day a savior would come to the rescue and eliminate all the suffering was a psychological necessity.
And an unscientific improbability, some philosophers would say. But what we need to say is that people should not just focus on what can be, on the afterlife, because that's what some of the religious leaders want people to believe. We are saying the afterlife is very much important, but you must confront that which is confronting people now. And that is why progressive leaders would engage and talk against injustice. They would engage and talk against oppression. And that is why I'm referring to the emergence of the liberation theology movement in Latin America, to the emergence of contextual theology in South Africa, to the emergence of black theology in South Africa. In fact, much more progressive writers will tell you that the prophetic mission of religion and of religious denominations, amongst which is the church, is to engage in confronting the injustices that are there in the present world. Poverty, disease, greed, and many other things that are afflicting the modern world.
Jeremiah Kamara again says, understandably, the church is like an old friend that has served blacks well throughout times when nothing else did, right? But despite this legacy, there comes a time when blacks must open to meeting new friends, such as the institution of logic, reason, and free thinking. Perhaps the most insidiously devastating generational hand me-down proposal in African culture is when he says they were advised to lay our burdens in the lap of Jesus and told that God will provide all of our needs. So literal adherence, he says, to this biblical axiom has not only helped to hinder our will to be self-reliant, but also created a state of dependency upon divine intervention unparalleled.
But most of the questions that Kamara is raising have been addressed. And in fact, when you delve into the Christology of most liberation theology writers, Leonardo Boff, Gustavo Gutierrez, John Sobrino, Juan Secundo, and you go to North America, James Cone, you come here, Desmond Tutu, Budi Klachale, and many others. They have long addressed those questions to say that indeed religion, Christianity, has historically been used as an instrument of oppression. Remember, in the article, one of the points that I'm making is that during the 1500s, you had the Renaissance and the European Reformation, where reason and criticism were brought into religion. However, during the colonial times, we had the most brutal marriage between colonial master and a religious institute. However, as we went on, religion was able to extricate itself from the oppressive practices, and there emerged a much more progressive interpretation of the scriptures. I think the challenge that we are having now is to reinstate and for progressive and socially relevant and social justices to re-emerge so that they can counter the prosperity and the cultic practices.
Okay. Finally, Mr. Tlian, what are your views as far as the man of God, T.B. Joshua, is concerned?
Well, I think I wouldn't want to judge, as the theologians would say, lest I be judged. And I think, if I'm correct, there's James in the New Testament saying that. But what I'm able to do is to at least from a sociological point of view, offer a criticism to say, without having all the facts, at least the information at my disposal seemed to suggest that there are elements of prosperity which we need to be very critical. There are elements of giving hope, false hope, like if what we read is true, curing AIDS. I'm saying those are not true, and if that is the case, it is misleading and it needs to be corrected.
Consul Tlian, thank you very much.
Thanks
for that input. This is Question Time, and that's where we'll end it for today. Our email address, questiontime@sabc.co.za, our Twitter handle @questiontime24. From me and the crew, have yourself a wonderful time. Goodbye.
very good evening to you. Welcome to Business Review. Mark Shuttleworth victorious today in his fight with the Reserve Bank, and he says he'll take it further. We'll find out what he has to say, and we'll be speaking nuclear energy. First, a look at the day's top news stories. SADC security agents are asked to investigate the latest shooting outside Maseru in Lesotho. It's the third since the attempted coup a month ago. Another northwest municipality shuts down. The troubled Ngaka Modiri Molema district municipality has been closed due to security concerns. Dwayne Vermeulen's been given as much time as possible to recover from a rib injury as the Springbok team is announced to face New Zealand on Saturday. The top business story: South African-born tech billionaire Mark Shuttleworth has succeeded in his R250 million legal challenge against the South African Reserve Bank. The Supreme Court of Appeal in Bloemfontein has ordered the central bank to repay his money with interest. Shuttleworth, who now lives in the Isle of Man, shot to prominence when he sold an internet security consultancy, which he founded while in his final year at Cape Town University, for $575 million. He emigrated in 2001 and in 2009 decided to take the rest of his capital with him. But exchange control regulations effectively blocked the expatriation of some of his assets from the country. The Reserve Bank levied a 10% exit tax amounting to R250 million, which Shuttleworth said he was paying under protest. One of the points argued by Shuttleworth was that the bank exit tax was not approved by national legislation and that amounted to taxation without representation. Shuttleworth said in a statement today that he was forced to emigrate because of exchange controls that made it impossible for him to pursue his career from within South Africa. He is now considering challenging exchange controls in the Constitutional Court to ensure that the ruling benefits all South Africans. He said he'll put the R250 million plus interest into a trust to assist those who cannot afford court cases where the counterparty is the state. Well, government says that no deal on the nuclear build program has been signed with Russia or any other country. The Energy Department and the South African Nuclear Energy Corporation dismissing reports that Russia has been afforded a deal to build nuclear power plants that enhance the country's power supplies. Nexus says the deal signed with Russia is just an intergovernmental agreement to pave the way for procurement processes. It held a press briefing today to once again assure South Africa that no deal has been done with Russia that will trump an open procurement process. The department is looking at a new nuclear build program to generate a